music that outside of Dixieland that you might have picked up on?
Oh yeah, there was Bob Wills, of course. He was quite an organized band, and a lot of the music was, what would you call it, country swing, I guess. And I never got to hear Bob Wills in person, but heard a lot of spin-offs, cats who would play that kind of music. And actually I jammed a little with some of the guys in Amarillo where they were I was on the clarinet in those days, and they played in all those sharp keys, so it was kind of stimulating.
Why was it stimulating?
Well, because they would be in 3 sharps and the clarinet would be in 5 sharps, so you always add 2 sharps with the B flat clarinet.
I wanted to ask you a question about. I'm fascinated about the idea of so many cats. In today's music world, you go see a live show. Everything's a lot of formulaic stuff. This goes across the board. It could be rock, pop, jazz. Doesn't matter. Very, very formulaic. The audience is fed, spoon-fed, greatest hits. It's very contained and controlled. And I know that your generation and you specifically coming up, I want you to extrapolate on the phrase that you never played the same song once. Can you talk about that, and maybe the first band that you were in where that really went down, where you had a set list, but yet every night you played the same tunes, but they were always different?
Well, that's sort of the jazz mode. You might have a few little underpinnings that, like the kickoff, the intro, or the head, we called it, the main theme. But after that, it was, of course, improvisation, and it would be different every night. And, all the great jazz people used that in their playing. You could have something you would play the kickoff part just to set it up, and then comes the solos, and that's where anything could happen, and everything did happen.
Can you talk about an early point in your career where where that was going on?
Well, yes, when I went to Texas Tech, I ran across a very good little jazz band there, and I was dumbfounded. They were much more advanced than I was, just out of high school, and they had an excellent clarinetist and a trombonist and bass and drums and piano. And, they were more like Jack Teagarden than anything else, but they knocked me out, of course, and every time they played, I would dig them and try to pick up some ideas and tricks.
Can you go back?
That was sort of the beginning of my jazz life.
What can you you just referenced Teagarden? Can you juxtapose the band you ran into was it at North Texas or Texas Tech?
Well, before I was in the Army, I went to Texas Tech. And I was in an Army band for almost 3 years, and decided I would go to North Texas after that.
Can you juxtapose what you were hearing from that jazz band at Texas Tech vis-a-vis Teagarden?
Yes, well, as I say, it was a similar makeup. The trombone player also was the singer, and that's the kind of band Teagarden had. He was a great singer and a wonderful trombonist. So that was the sort of a reference to Jack Teagarden. Of course, I'd never heard Jack Teagarden in person or anything, but I heard these guys, and knocked me out. I think I liked that kind of combo jazz. Five people or something like that. What we call a combo.
Do you think that Stan Getz? This is just an opinion, but he was such a lyrical player, and he was such a great interpreter of people's tunes, like Johnny Mandel. Do you think he really learned how to play around a vocalist because of Teagarden? I didn't realize Teagarden sang.
Oh yeah, Teagarden was a singer. I guess he probably wasn't known as the greatest singer, but he did some duets with Louis Armstrong, and he was a down-home singer. Like a kind of a musician's style. And Stan played with Teagarden.
That was his, I mean, he was with Teagarden in the 9th grade, and they actually the truant officer came to find Stan, and Teagarden became his guardian.
That's great.
Yeah, I know. But because
I guess I didn't even know that.
Well, we're always learning. But no, I mean, just because I've been digging into this, I'm trying to figure out. He was such a lyrical player, and he, whether it was Tony Bennett or just whatever it was. I mean, he was always just weaving around lyrics, or people could write, and I'm wondering. But Teagarden, he wasn't like a. I mean, he wasn't a. He sang, but he wasn't a great singer. Is that right?
No, that's not. You wouldn't call him a great singer.
He was a great drinker.
He just sang.
Right. No, that's cool. I mean, that's what it was about. Talking to the legendary Bob Dorough here. So, did you actually go overseas to Germany? Were you overseas, or were you stationed in the States when you were in the Army band?
No, I didn't ever go overseas. I had a disability, a punctured eardrum, and so fortunately for me, I didn't have to do the battles. I didn't help win World War II, but I was lucky enough to get in the band, and I was in 2 different Army bands, and there were a lot of northern jazz musicians in that outfit. We called it an outfit, that company, and learned more about jazz and did some writing and jamming, and it was kind of like a conservatory being in the Army band.
Well, and you definitely got paid for it too, right?
Oh yeah, well, we made a very small amount of money.
Well, no, even
once a month.
But yeah, I mean, in that time, still, I mean, you got paid, you got to sing for your supper, and the point is now you have this pay to play mentality, which is very unnerving with the value structure of our country. So, I mean, can you talk about what the Northern Cats, if anything? I mean, did they bring a blues factor to you? Did they?
Well, they had obviously heard some of the masters that I hadn't yet heard in person. I mean, there was a tenor man that played like Lester Young, and that was pretty titillating. And there were a couple of good arrangers, and all we did was rehearse every day, and you could write music and play it at the rehearsal. And we had different sizes of bands. We had a regular Army band, then we had a concert band, orchestra, sort of, and then we had jazz bands in various sizes, big bands and combos of various kinds. So I was meeting influences from the outer world. You got to know I led a very sheltered life at first. I grew up in West Texas. I was born in Arkansas, but I grew up in West Texas, and not far from Lubbock. That's why my first college experience was Texas Tech.
Oh, I see. That's
later on in North Texas. I was majoring in composition, and it was a hotbed of bebop jazz. By that time, the bebop revolution had hit, and everybody was playing Charlie Parker songs and Dizzy Gillespie songs. I
mean, for the layperson, by the way, we're live worldwide with Bob Dorough right now on Power Talk. But I mean, can you decipher what Dizzy and Bird? I mean, was it just the I don't want to simplify it too much, but the bebop came out, it followed swing, and up to that point, there were basically show tunes and the Great American Songbook. Where did those cats? How simple were the tunes that they truly were creating? And then, separate from that, what in terms of their licks or their chops, how did they take those simple tunes and make them into bebop?
Well, yeah, they actually took the old songs and the standard pops and recreated them in using just the metrical structure and the harmonic structure. And they would write a new song or a new tune to fit that pattern. And, they were trying to find different notes that hadn't been used, intervals, we would say. And they would play the kind of an odd tune. And I met some Army musicians in Amarillo after I got out of the Army that said, "Have you heard Diz and Bird?" And I said, "Well, no, I heard about them, but I didn't hear them." So they invited me over and played the records. And I remember one was called Hot House. And I said, "Boy, is that weird." And he said, "Oh, that's just, what is this thing called love?" "Really?" "Yeah." Play it again. So, you could hear that it was da 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 da. But they're playing da da ba da da ba doo ba da 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 ba da doo ba da ba doo da. It's so far from Hot House. I mean, from what is this thing called love? But that was just one facet of their creations, Bird and Diz. And, of course, they also composed completely original jazz compositions.
That was very well articulated. Can you talk about, I just got off the phone with Ron Carter talking about Stan Getz, and him and Kenny Barron both point to this album for musicians only, 1955 with Stitt, Diz, and Stan. Stan was, where do you fit him in terms of his significance to the bebop language?
Oh, well, he was just such a terrific player. And, they say he really wasn't that trained. It was all just a fine ear. He had a great ear. And he could play. I know he did a recording with Eddie Sauter,
Focus.
The great arranger and composer. And, he could just play anything. Seems like he just soaked it up. And that record with Diz is one of my favorites. He plays so well. And, of course, I adore the playing of Dizzy Gillespie.
What was it about the three of them up on you, Kenny, and Ron, rave about that album. Those guys were competitive in a very loving way, but, what was it about that was so transcendent for you?
Well, I think, everybody was really on their toes. You might say they were on their toes, knowing they had such a great front line with Diz and Stan, and everybody played their very top level best. I say that was the secret of that album.
Here's the next conceptual question for Bob Dorough. In my generation, I'm 38. Younger generations, people are very obsessed in all styles of music, or all genres. Where the one is, where is the one? You got to know where to find the one. And I want to ask you your opinion on the idea of that any note can be the one, in the sense that you get lost in a jam, lost in a dream, you get lost in some sort of improvisational, long, stretched out thing, and you kind of lose the one. You realize that it will come back around, and that any note can be the one. And I want to get your opinion on that.
Oh, let's see. What would I think about that? Well, I hate to get lost when I'm jamming. It's a drag.
It's a drag, but what I'm saying is, when you were playing freer music, you know what you understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, I do understand. The one will come around again, like you said, and so you've got to be able to feel it and find it and jump back in. But of course, we used to sort of denigrate the guys that did that. You don't want to be playing with some guys that are getting lost. You want to be playing with a bunch of guys that all on the beat, and they know where one always is. And I guess they were a bit of a drag if they got lost too much. But doing it yourself is very embarrassing if you get lost.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about cats that could do it well. I mean, it's hard, but people that do it well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about, can you talk about some cats that you admire? Because not the ones that would get lost all the time. That's sloppy. I'm talking about cats that truly turned it into an art form.
Yeah, well, Miles did some pretty wild things, and you wouldn't know where one is yourself as a listener. But if you keep listening, you finally soak it in, and it makes sense like it always did. And Thelonious Monk was also great. I mean, he would fool you, He you wouldn't know what in the heck he was trying to do at first, but with a few listenings, his records were always a knockout. It took a little work in absorbing just exactly where his beat was and his one.
Can you talk about being on the bandstand with Miles and when this occurred, or was it listening to records? Can you talk about a
Well, I was just an admirer of Miles. I never was really on a gig with Miles. I recorded with him. He liked my singing and invited me to do a Christmas song with him, and that's how that started. Wound up, he recorded 3 of my songs, and one was the Christmas song called Blue Xmas, and that came out in 1962 on Columbia. And then 4 years later on The Sorcerer, when he had a completely different band, the one when he changed to Ron Carter, Tony Williams, and Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, The Sorcerer. And for some reason, he tacked on my Fran Landesman song. I wrote songs with one of the world's great lyric writers, Fran Landesman, and I wrote Nothing Like You. And Miles knew it, and he had heard me sing it many times, and we had recorded it. And he tacked it on the end of The Sorcerer. It was a different band. It was the old band with Jimmy Cobb on drums and
Paul Chambers.
Paul Chambers, yeah. And also in that same year, 62, he recorded my jazzy song called Devil May Care. And that was an instrumental. I did the 2 vocals, Nothing Like You and Blue Xmas.
Talking to Bob Dorough here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Can we go back and talk about specific? I think it's just important for younger generations because there's a sterility within improvisational music today, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I really believe that a lot of the music is being created in academia and not on the bandstand. And then on top of that, you have a lot of cats who were brilliant players, like Ron Carter. I'm not afraid to say this, but the best players are not always the best teachers. And then, thirdly, there's no real. I know you play at the Deerhead Inn once in a while. You're up in the Poconos there, and with Billy Goodwin and the late great Phil Woods and all those cats. But there's no venues to really play 7 nights a week anymore. So I'm very fascinated with this idea of any note can be the one. And if you could talk about a specific tune on record that you heard, Miles or Monk, that people can go to and check it out, because for you it was very scintillating in terms of having to listen for when they came back around again.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I don't know. Almost any of their tracks. I think the cool music that Miles helped create. He had a lot of great thinkers with him, like Johnny Carisi and
T.O.
Yeah, and Jerry Mulligan, and they did that little. It was the birth of the cool, they call it. Well, that was titillating, and we listened to it hour after hour. And, of course, we always found Bird fulfilling just Charlie Parker's records. not to listen to once or twice, but every night for a year. And Thelonious Monk, I discovered him in North Texas. All the other students thought he was weird, but of course he was right all along. He was the right composer, great composer.
Why did people consider him weird or wrong, and why was he right?
Well, I don't know. He had the sort of off-the-wall kind of melodies and what would look like a primitive kind of piano playing, but it was so skilled that you didn't realize it until you listened carefully. And at first, it was just completely a different style of playing the piano and also writing the tunes. And, they made a superficial judgment that he was weird, and they sort of laughed at me having ordered them. We used to order records through Downbeat ads. I think reading Downbeat down in Texas, in Denton there. And we'd some guy would get a new record and he'd say, I got a new bird, or I got a new diz, and then we'd all gather together and listen to the record together. It was a very nice little time for me.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned the birth of the cool. Stan Getz came back from Sweden because Ornette was driving consciousness in his own way, like we talked about. Miles and Train were doing their thing. What was Stan doing that he contributed to the birth of the cool?
Let's see. I don't think he was in that group.
The book that I read from Donald Magan about him basically.
Fan off. Wait, excuse me a minute.
No problem. Talking to Bob Dorough here on the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk. A legendary player, a guy who's just, he's played with everybody, always curious, always learning, always trying to.
So everything's okay here? Had a little glitch in the
little hitch
family
in the,
environment.
Little hitch in the giddy up. No, I mean,
I don't think of
go ahead.
Stan Getz as being in the birth of the cool. He was, he had his own thing. He went from just playing beautiful saxophone. I heard the Four Brothers in Fort Worth while I was a student at North Texas. They played the Fort Worth Lake Casino, and of course we were all there, and had the four great saxophonists, including Stan. But in later years in New York, I used to go to jam sessions, and I'd see Zoot and Al, but you'd never see Stan Getz. I mean, I guess he was too much of a success to go to homespun jam sessions. Anyway, I never really knew him that well, but we kept track of him some way. And then, of course, he had his bossa nova period. That was a unique thing. But I don't think of him as being in the cool school.
I dig. No, I dig it a lot. I mean, do you remember, can you talk about at all, if you remember Woody, Stan was like the first call soloist, right?
Yeah, he was the prettiest and the best.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was a good. Listen, he was came out of that Brando and James Dean school in terms of looks. But I mean, can you talk about why he was what he saw in him that made him? I mean, the Four Brothers were an epic band. They were all junkies at that time too.
Yeah.
But what was it? How did Stan draw people to him with his playing?
I think it was just his charm and his beautiful technique and wonderful, warm, sumptuous tone. He got a sound like no one else Zoot and Al were great tenor men too, but Stan had that something extra. James Dean and Marlon Brando, you say? Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
He had that charisma, heavy charisma.
Can you give an example of that charisma?
Well, I know that he probably wowed a lot of women, so he parlayed the music into his love life, right?
Well, I wasn't around. I mean, was he on the bandstand looking at, like, was he playing his solo?
No. I don't have anything to prove that. I just know that he was a real lover. He was a doll. He was just so good looking. And then when he played the saxophone, of course, who wouldn't swoon?
That's right. Can you talk about, give me a great story about Sugar Ray Robinson and his love of improvisational music?
Sugar Ray?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I worked for him.
Bob, I'm not, listen, we're doing an interview, man. This is your show. This is about you. Of course, man. I mean, this is totally cool because you were doing some of the hippest stuff for decades. So I want you to tell me a great story about him and his love of the improvisational melodic improviser.
Well, yeah, he was a jazz fan, and he had some jazz in his bar up in Harlem. But I was with him as his accompanist, and he was tap dancing, doing you might call it a variety show. And I met a lot of wonderful people that I hadn't met before working for Sugar, such as Earl Hines, Edie Gourmet, Louis Armstrong, wow. Count Basie.
Wow.
I met all those people. They were in our various reviews. We played all over the continent, and eventually he took me to Paris, and that was my first trip abroad. And this was already in 1954. And wherever we went, we'd go out to hear the local musicians play. And he usually, if the budget would warrant it, he usually had a big band to play his show. And I would either play piano or conduct, depending on several factors.
How big was the orchestra?
Well, like a big band, 4 brass, 4 trumpets, 3 trombones, 5 saxes, that kind of thing. We played quite a few of those in theaters. And It was a great experience because I would go to, for instance, Chicago and have to meet a bunch of new guys and get them in shape to rehearse the music and then play the show. And it was work. Everybody was working, and we loved it.
And Sugar Ray was up there with other people, just by himself, tap dance. I mean, this is amazing.
Oh no, he had a great partner, a comedian, and a dancer also, Joe Scott. He actually was my buddy as we traveled around the country. Joe Scott, Scotty, we called him. Scotty. But they did a couple of little songs and told some jokes, and they were straight man for each other for some of the jokes, and then they would do their routines, tap dancing accompanied by music, and then the other guests would come up.
Can you
with the Count Basie trip, we had Count Basie would open with his big band, and then Ray would come up and do his spot right after Count Basie. So I got to sit on the piano bench right where Bill Basie had been sitting. It was a hot seat.
Can you talk about the ragtime guys that you met? The ragtimers, the way that they burned in the pocket, the way they just burned, and yet they were not overly concerned about perfection. I mean, to me, it's like I talked to Roger Kellaway. I guess the one cat he met was Earl Father Hines. Maybe it was somebody else. I don't know who it was, but you had a chance to meet some ragtimers when you were with Ray.
Well, no, I missed out on the ragtimers.
But
Earl Hines was more of a modern.
Yeah. Okay.
Player.
So just talk about the vibe that those guys had. Even Basie. I mean, to me, like those cats burned, and they were not concerned about perfection. And today we're all caught up in that. And part of it's the digitization and the ability to fix every mistake, and even God forbid, turn crappy musicians into rock stars. You don't even have to. You don't even have to be good to be a rock star anymore. I just want you to talk about the vibe that those guys gave off, what made them transcendent characters, and what was inspiring to you about them.
Well, they were just so elegant and usually well-dressed, and they knew what they were doing when they got on the bandstand. You could tell it was all confidence when they got up to play, and that was inspiring, of course. But all confidence and amiability, and here I am, and we're going to send it out to you. We're going to send it right out to you there. You better get it.
Can you give an example of how it impacted your own development?
Well, I learned a lot about show business from Louis Armstrong and Nat King Cole, and they were really my big heroes as far as singing goes.
What did you learn? Also, what did you learn from them?
To get to reach contact with the audience, sing a song in such a way that they're completely wrapped up in it, and they hear every word, and they let you do it your way, and they're digging it right with you. To get the audience, it's a special knack, I think, that Louis had and Diz had. Dizzy Gillespie was also a great showman and jokester, as well as a brilliant player.
Stan Getz was as well, I think.
Yeah, well, let's see. I always thought he just sort of took care of business by going right into the saxophone and playing it.
I've been talking to a lot of cats who say that, that just what you're talking about. I mean, he could be, he had everybody bow to the audience. He would a lot of times share stories about the backgrounds.
Oh, we gave him etiquette lessons, right?
The etiquette. I mean, I know when he was really high on cocaine, he might talk the entire set and play like 2 tunes. But it's like, I mean, I'm just trying to get at this idea. Like, to me, Stan was not a prolific songwriter. But he
wasn't much of a composer.
No, not a composer, but an amazing interpreter, lyricist, and then able to bring people. He connected viscerally with people, and I just wanted you to talk about that idea of playing your life. How no premeditation, not trying to playing what you feel and what you hear, and that and how that's kind of the old school improvisational methodology.
Yeah, I think we all have the feelings, and we have a feeling for the song, and you try to interpret it, and you reach the audience that way. And for Stan, it was, his instrumental style of handling the music. Such a brilliant improviser, and singers, that's a different thing. They're dealing with the lyrics. So that's what we do. I mean, you have to do that to reach the audience. You have to. It's not premeditated, but it's sort of felt right there in the scene that you're in at that time.
Can you talk about how you learned, or who you were influenced by, in the sense of being able to play, not just comp on the piano while you were singing, but also get your own individual voice into it, and how you really, maybe one of the gigs that where you were able to play in some upholstered sewer for a month or two and just really get comfortable, because instead of just comping, but actually doing what you do.
Oh yeah, well, I learned a lot from Joe Mooney, who was a wonderful singer. Basically, he was an organist, but he also did a series of recordings with a little combo where he played the accordion.
Wow.
They say he took a dare, and because someone said, "Oh, and that's one instrument that can't swing, the accordion." So he took it up. It's a little like the organ, so he took it up just to obfuscate this guy, show him he was wrong, I guess. Anyway, he loved it, and I loved his recordings, but he was able to sing and also play little filigrees, I guess I would call them, little fills and filigrees. He was a great man. Another influence of mine, Nat King Cole and Louis Armstrong and Dizzy Gillespie and Joe Mooney might possibly be my major influences as far as singing goes. For piano, I like Bud Powell.
Oh, I dig. No, this is so cool. I mean, to know, to trace the one of the L's on my show is lineage. To be able to trace back the lineage of this stuff is just absolutely crucial. Please take me inside. I was born in 78, so please take me inside this psychedelic 44th Street portable flower factory. What was that? And
oh, that was kind of a...
How did even that come about? And then what was, I mean, that to me, I would have been, well, for anything else, I would have just been going on mushrooms or acid and coming to see you every night.
Yeah. That was a yearly thing that the Scholastic magazine did, picking the 4 of the best rock lyrics, and I got in on it with Steve Swallow. He was the producer.
Wow.
And he asked me to sing, and so I sang 4 tunes. And the following year, he bowed out, and I became the producer. And, of course, I kept being the singer, too. But I would make the arrangements and book the band. And it was basically jazz men playing pop music or rock and roll music, the best lyric hits of the year. I think I did 3 years in total. I wish they'd put that out again.
Well, I mean, are you sitting on tape? That has to be. I'll write liner notes. I mean, do you have recordings of that stuff?
No, not anymore.
Who were the cats that were playing with you on a consistent basis?
Well, they were mostly my buddies. Bill Goodwin is on some. The late Bill Tackus is on some of them. Stuart Scharf is on one. The late Stuart Scharf. He was my partner for a while. And Ben Tucker maybe on one of them.
Sure.
Another buddy of mine.
I mean, did cats did people like Miles come to see you? People pop in and say hi once in a while? Like, I mean, how vibrant is, how much?
No. Miles never went out to see me or anything. I always sang for him at parties. He would say, I think he would get bored with the swimming pool and the party, and he would say, "Sing me a song," and he'd drag me into the piano, which was all right with me because it was cooler in there, out of the sun. This happened in Hollywood, and I'd sing him a song. Of course, I sang him the hippest songs I knew.
Could you sing a little piece of one song you would sing to him?
Well, it was always Devil May Care and Nothing Like You. Nothing like you has ever been seen before. Nothing like you existed in days of yore. Never were lips so kissable. Never were eyes so bright. I can't believe it possible. You bring me such delight. Nothing can match the rapture of your embrace. Nothing can catch the magic that's in your face, etc., etc.
Wow. Well,
it goes on and on. That's
Bob,
why he loved it.
Why did he? Because it just went on and on forever, or was it because he was like, boy, I can really...
Well, yeah, it was an unusual form, and he'd never heard a song like that.
Explain why it was an unusual form.
Well, let's see, I don't know. It's, the old song form is AABA, and this is more convoluted. I think you might say it's AABC, A prime, B prime, C prime, and take it out.
I haven't actually listened to that track on Sorcerer, but is that in a similar mode that you were singing on his album?
Well, that's the one. Yeah, that's on the Sorcerer.
And it was that unusual style. It wasn't AAB.
Yeah, I used to sing it to him in person, and that's why he said, "Let's record it." In the year of 1962.
Absolutely. Now, can you alluded to this. You saw the Four Brothers, and then years later, you'd run into Al and Zoot, and they'd be at the jam sessions, but Stan was just too cool for that. I mean, do you think Stan? He obviously had a big ego, but I mean, what is your take on him as a human being? Did you find him to be to me that just the way you said it made me feel like he thought he was above that.
Well, I didn't get to know him that well. He was here in the Poconos a while, and he actually came over to my house and we rehearsed. And he liked my singing, paid me the compliment, and he said we're gonna have a job. We worked Lenny's Turnpike, and it was two of my neighbors, Pocono musicians, Buddy Jones and what's his name, Jerry Siegel on drums, and we all went to Boston and played Lenny's Turnpike. But somewhere between Stroudsburg and Boston, I think he may have gotten high. Everybody was watching him real close, his family and his managers, and that he wouldn't drink while he was here. But he must have gotten into some harder stuff because he was a completely different person. And you got to remember, it was either Zoot or Al that someone said, how about Stan Getz? And he says, he's a nice bunch of guys.
Well, actually, the original one was he was a bunch of nice guys, and then Then it turned to he was a nice bunch of guys. So it went from being so that was the original one. It was a bunch of nice guys.
They more or less mean the same, I guess.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, because anyway, can you talk? This is interesting. When did you go to Lenny's to play with him? What year was that?
Oh, gee, I don't. I'm not good at remembering years.
I know, but what I'm saying is, like, was it after he had already become a pop star with the Bossa stuff, or was it?
Oh yeah, he was famous.
He was famous at that point. Famous. And so. I want you to talk about, just from your perception, the Jekyll and Hyde quality of seeing Stan before you left for Lenny's, and then how he became a different person.
Yeah, well, what can I say? I mean, he was late for the gig, which of course makes you think he's out turning on or something. And then he completely forgot that he invited me to sing, and he just started playing, and of course we all jumped in, playing standards that everyone knew, and he didn't act like he was too satisfied with it, but it was more charming when he was around the Poconos, and I think Monica was with him, and that was his wife, right?
Absolutely. That was his second. Absolutely. So were they? I'm just trying to, because they were living in Irvington at the Gershwin Mansion, but I didn't know they lived in the Poconos for a while. You're saying he lived out?
Oh, no, they weren't living here. They just came out for a while.
They came out for a bit.
And they were trying to dry him up. And, they said, don't make sure Stan doesn't get a drink. And Stan called me from the filling station and said, Bob, go to the corner and get me a fifth of gin and a quart of rye and a couple of beers.
No, so he was scheming. I mean, no, he was
Oh yeah, he was scheming.
He was always.
And
scheming.
I said, Stan, I can't do that. I've been told not to. Now come on up. We're going to have a lot of fun. You just come on up. Stay straight. He was very tight with the bass player, Buddy Jones, who was my neighbor.
Is Buddy still around or no?
No, Buddy died.
What about what about Siegel? I've been interested in that. He's a good drummer, man.
Yeah, he was on my Devil May Care recording, my first one.
Is he still with us?
He died.
He died too. Because he was he was a really good player. I mean,
yep.
did you did you get to play with Stan when he was straight?
Well, we rehearsed for this so-called gig, and that's the only time I played with him.
And
after that, he was friendly to me, and invited me to New York to get in free to some of his shows there. And Monica was also very friendly, and they treated me well. But just on that one night at Lenny's Turnpike, Lenny's on the Turnpike, he just went left, and I'm sure it was a drug.
So let me just be clear. He showed up late for the gig, and then when you, how did you know that he wasn't aware? He forgot that you were supposed to sing. How did he make that? How did that become apparent to you?
Well, he just started playing tunes, and suddenly the gig was over. I mean, I think they cut it short for some reason, maybe because he was late. It was kind of weird.
Very weird.
We were all in our own car, and he had come with someone else. I assumed it was the manager or something. I didn't know his manager really, but it was just a left turn. But it was okay. I mean, he still was brilliant. He played the hell out of the saxophone.
But I mean, I guess I just want to be clear. When you rehearsed, you had a couple of tunes that you were gonna play. That,
yeah, I taught him a couple of my tunes. I wrote them out for him.
Which ones did you teach him, by the way? You remember?
Without Rhyme or Reason.
I love that tune.
Oh, thank you.
I
wrote that with Fran Landisman, and I think I taught him Devil May Care.
I wanted to ask you. I mean, for me, someone that has anxiety and also a little bit of my pride can get in the way. I mean, I know Stan was a master and he was a band leader at that time and he was a pop star, but I mean, at some point I would have just kind of been like, Stan, we had these tunes worked out. I mean, you didn't feel it was your place to actually point out that this is part of the reason why you came up there was to do these tunes?
Oh no, he came up to dry out, get away from.
No, when you were on the band, when you were at Lenny's, and it was obvious that he had forgotten. I mean, you never felt like the initiative to say, Stan, why don't we play?
Yeah,
this?
he didn't say, well, why don't you sing that song? We have a guest. Blah blah blah. I mean, he just went straight ahead with the gig. I don't remember too much after that, but I guess I was deep down kind of disappointed, but I still did my best to play for him, and so did the other two guys, and it was just a weird scene. I'll tell you, Jake, I'm getting a little tired. My hand in my ear.
We got another hour, 2 hours. No, I'm kidding. Listen, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. So one more question for you before I go.
Okay.
Bob, if there's one reason, it's a two-part question. Why would you want to see a film documentary on Stan Getz? And number two, why is Stan Getz still relevant in the lexicon of music today?
Well, he was a giant of a player, and he was also highly recorded. Yeah, I don't know how many LPs or CDs.
130.
130? Yeah, that's pretty good. So he's definitely big in the history of jazz, and I guess they're going to have a video of him, right?
Well, this is a film documentary. But I'm just curious about what in this documentary, what you would what you'd be most interested in learning about.
Oh, maybe his whole life story and his personal life. I know he must have gotten a very young start, and I've probably read some of it in the trade magazines, but I'm sure you'll bring out all that, his life and all that.
And why is he relevant to the lexicon of music today?
Because of his, partly because of the fame and also the vast parameters he worked in, from the bossa nova to Eddie Sauter, for instance, and he sort of ran the gamut.
Bob Dorough, we've been cooking for an hour. I think I got some really nice stories out of you, and I appreciate you taking the time, brother. I hope we can connect.
Great being with you, Jake, and good luck with that whole story of the great Stan Getz.
All right, brother. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Gone.
Bye-bye.